your country.
Hi, I'm Nicole Davis, and I'm a CPA with Butler Davis Tax and Accounting. And I want to talk about the different filing statuses that you can choose on your individual income tax return. So there are 5 different filing statuses. They are single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, and qualifying widower. So let's talk about each of these briefly. Single. Single means that you're not legally attached to anyone. So if you're unmarried, if you were married and got a divorce, pretty much you can file as single. Single has a much smaller standard deduction than head of household and married filing jointly, but you generally qualify for all of the different credits, and the phase-out limits are lower. So let's talk about married filing separately. Pretty much the IRS on married filing separately because you get treated like you're single. You get the same standard deduction as single, and they generally disqualify you for a lot of those great credits. But sometimes people have a valid reason for married filing separately. It could be that your spouse has a liability and you don't want to be attached or have a responsibility to pay that liability. It could be your spouse could be falsifying their tax return and you don't want to have any parts of that. It could also be that you want to qualify for a lower student loan payment. So you have separate returns. They generally do married filing separately to qualify for a lower student loan payment if the student loan payment is not being calculated based on the total household income and it's just being calculated on that person's tax return income. All right, so I would not recommend doing married filing separately if you qualify for one of the other filing statuses and you don't have a valid reason to do so. Also, married filing separately, you have lower income limits regarding your tax bracket. So it's like the single tax bracket for the most part. So let's talk about married filing jointly. Married filing jointly means just that you're jointly attached to someone and you are married as of the last day of the last month in the year. So if you got married on 12/31 of this year, you can file married filing jointly. Now, married filing jointly has some benefits because you get a higher standard deduction and you also have higher income limits when it comes to the tax brackets. You also move into that phase where your phase-out limits are a lot higher for certain credits. If you are getting married and you want to take advantage of married filing jointly, do so by the end of the year. So now let's talk about head of household. So head of household is a filing status that kind of gets abused. In order to qualify for head of household, you must be unmarried by the end of the year, you must provide more than half the support for your household, and you must have a qualifying person. Now, it gets abused because there are some people who are legally married and they also claim head of household. Now, I would say that is totally fine if you qualify that way. So how do you qualify if you're legally married? Well, pretty much you have to have lived apart from your spouse the last 6 months of the year. Yes. And that is a strict last 6 months of the year. So that means no sleepovers, no booty calls, and no last minute, oh, I miss you, baby. Can you come stay with me a couple of days? Yeah, you can't do that if you're going to file head of household. So just remember, if you're legally married, you have to have been separated from your spouse and not have stayed with them the last 6 months of the year. All right. Last is the qualifying widower. If your spouse dies during the tax year, you generally can use the same filing status that you used in the year that they died. So if you had a spouse that died this year and last year you filed married filing jointly, you can also file married filing jointly this year. And then the next 2 years, you can actually file as a qualifying widower. The qualifying widower status is only applicable for 2 years after their death. And that is all I have on filing statuses, and